Okay, good morning, Dad.
Good morning.
Today is Friday, September 26th. And do you think war is around the corner? Are we coming? Is that what's happening?
You mean a world war, a regional war, or we just anywhere?
A,
Okay.
a
Well,
big war where the U.S. is getting like we're major escalation. We have two powder
yeah,
kegs in Ukraine
right.
and Gaza,
I don't,
Israel.
yeah. I mean, the one place where I can see like a new, I don't know if you would call it a war, but a military operation breaking out is actually in Venezuela. That could happen any day. We've got all those ships there, and apparently we're positioning assets on Puerto Rico and so on and so forth. So it looks like that's all preparatory to some sort of strike on Venezuela. Now, I
That's
don't,
so crazy. I mean, I almost forget about Venezuela because we have
yeah.
these two dumpster fires going on now, and we want to start another one with Venezuela. I don't get it. It's so strange because we rushed all of our ships down there, and we blew up a couple of speedboats that were supposedly carrying narco terrorists with no evidence, and then we just stopped.
Uh-huh.
What? Why?
Yeah. Well, there's a good question there, but who knows? Maybe they just want to get. Um, I think another ship of special operations, a clandestine ship, showed up in the area. They were waiting for that, and maybe there's some other vessel that they want to add to the fleet there. Who knows? But yeah, it kind of makes you wonder whether or not they really had thought things through. But it still looks like we can't be sure, but it still looks like they are planning to strike Venezuela in some way. Probably at a decapitation strike, unfortunately.
Okay, all right. Well, that actually wasn't even the what I was looking at. Okay, something else to worry about. But do you see things escalating in the other conflicts? Do you see World War III? Okay, let me just explain my full conspiracy mode thinking, what I've been
Okay.
going down. Maybe I'm just insane and I want you to talk me out of it. But this is what I'm seeing. Okay, I'm seeing first Netanyahu, he's completely screwed. America, the public is turning on Israel fast. People are questioning so many things. The October 7th stories coming up more. People questioning like, hey, maybe this was a stand down order here and they allowed it to happen. Even people within Israel are questioning that. 9/11 is being brought to the forefront again. People are questioning the Charlie Kirk assassination, pointing it at Israel. The Epstein stuff, nobody's letting that go either. Trump's trying to bury it, but people are saying that, Epstein worked for Mossad, including Christian Zionist speakers such as Megyn Kelly and the late Charlie Kirk. They also said that, yeah, it was probably with Mossad, if I had to guess. Right now, we have the Samud aid flotilla that's on its way to Gaza right now. And they tried drone bombing it. And now Italy, Spain, and Greece are all sending naval ships to back it up. I think that's a huge thing. I mean, if they make it there and, Israel can't sink all these boats if they're being escorted by the Navy, right? I mean, would be an act of war. So if the aid flotilla makes it, God willing, they don't get captured by the Israelis and they break the blockade, I think that could be devastating for the whole Gaza operation. People will be able to see all of a sudden what you're doing, all these starving people and they'll be bringing aid and it'll stop, hopefully stem this genocide. And that's obviously what Israel doesn't want. Israel doesn't want anybody to see it. Nobody coming to Gaza, nobody look at it. And it's going to blow the whole thing open. So what can he do? Netanyahu only has one option. He has to escalate. He's feeling pressure internally, globally. He's in big trouble. The same thing with
Yeah.
Zelensky, right? Zelensky's in
Right.
huge
Right.
trouble.
Well, I think that's true. Both of them are in, yes, similar positions. Okay. Again, where, both of them do see an advantage in drawing the U.S. and the West in general onto their side rather, in a war. So these are very dangerous people, that we really should be very, very cautious in dealing with them and understand that they have this motivation. Now, in the case of Netanyahu, we've seen him act out. I think in act in this way several times in the past. I mean, he has escalated, and each time, though, it has been. Maybe with the exception of the most recent one, the failed decapitation strike in Doha against the Hamas negotiators, each of them has been a success. But even that was, supported by 75% of his people. So anyway, he sees that escalation pays off. That's true. And so we've discussed his, very difficult domestic political situation and his own legal troubles. All of these, motivate him to look for new conflict, expansion of the current conflict. That's very, very true. But it could be anywhere, like the last strike, of course, was in Qatar, which surprised everybody, shocked everybody. Who knows where the next one will be? Of course, the big question that we've discussed and a lot of people are discussing is like when the Iran war, the attack on Iran will begin. It's expected that it will happen at some point. Again, for reasons that I've stated earlier, I don't see any signs of that happening in the near future. Again, there's simply the constraints, the lack of the air defense, and so on and so forth. But you're right to point out his recklessness and the and his motivation for let's say, initiating another war with Iran. It would be reckless in the extreme, but he's shown himself to be reckless. And, he's gambled again and again, and it's actually paid off. And he might even go ahead, he might even attempt it. I think it's possible, without U.S. approval. Now, it seems clear from that in the past, they've always looked for that U.S. approval. And when they got it, back in June, they went ahead with the attack on Iran. And at the present time, there's no indication, that I've said there's any preparation for an attack on Iran. I know that a lot of people disagree with me, but I just don't see it right now. But it could happen somewhere else. Now, I think maybe it's something of an exaggeration to say that he's desperate. He is in a difficult political situation, but he almost seems to thrive in that. And I think he still has this really smug belief that that whatever happens in the U.S., that he has his billionaires there, he has his hands firmly on the levers of power, and that he can suppress, the dissent there and maintain his control. I guess recently it's been reported that he's been, by Tucker Carlson and other people, that he has been telling people in the Middle East that basically he controls the U.S. And I think that's true, that he has been, in fact, saying that. And yeah, and, maybe truthfully, he's been saying that. Now, in fact, we actually have him on tape saying that to an Israeli settler way back, like better than 20 years ago. So he's had this sense, but now he's telling other people, apparently. I think that he has a sense of invincibility, especially vis-a-vis the U.S., that he has this relationship firmly under control. So I don't think he's really desperate in that sense. But yeah, he's under a lot of pressure and he could do something. That's always true, but it may not be against Iran. That just may be too much at the present time. Who knows where he might strike next.
I just feel, though, that his faith probably in U.S. strength has to be waning. I mean, just if you're observing what's happened in the Ukraine war, or if you're Israel itself and you're relying on defense systems, the Patriots or the THAADs, we've seen how they work. Not very well, and we see we have very little production capacity, and time is all in favor of Iran. I feel like he has to realize that there's a short window of opportunity. There's the political component of like the midterms and whatnot, but China is developing at like an exponential rate. They are rolling out really impressive equipment, and they can do so at scale. And their supply will help Iran. They will supply it. So just the longer they wait, the favor goes to Iran. I feel like even though it is suicidal now, it'll be even more suicidal in the future. So, yeah, I'm on the other camp. Clearly,
okay.
I think that I just don't see. I don't know. Maybe they'll try to lay the groundwork. But often what we see is I don't think they try to lay the groundwork almost immediately before it happens. That's what happened with the strike on Iran. I remember just like 3 days or 4 days before it happened, it's just all over the news. Like, this is what's going to happen. but it wasn't so much building up right before, 2 or 3 weeks. Somewhat.
I think it was, in fact, actually the months and the weeks ahead. That there was a real build up to it, and that was the reason that, we ended up canceling our plans to go to Iran, because you could say, hey, wait a second, something seems to be, I wasn't sure, I thought probably so wouldn't happen, but there was a real chance. I don't hear any of that kind of, chatter in the background. It seems like the information war machine is in idle right now. They haven't turned it on. At some point, when they do, then I'll be looking. Then I'll say, yeah, maybe this is something on the horizon. I just don't see it right now. Now, yeah, but you make a good point that okay, they're waiting to. On the one hand, they do need to replenish their air defense stockpiles, and that's going to take some time. But on the other hand, that gives Iran time to, build up their forces and their defenses. And recently, it was an Iranian politician actually commented on the concrete steps that they were taking. That they're importing. They already have MiG-29s from Russia, and there are Su 31s or 35s. I can't remember. Very advanced aircraft. I think there were Su-35s will be delivered. We don't know when. And then he also said S-400s are being delivered. Don't know if they're actually on the way or they're going to, there's a future delivery date. It's not quite sure. But if they haven't arrived already, they will arrive in Iran at some point. He also mentioned Chinese air defense. I remember in HQ, the Hongqi. So yeah, they are doing things. We just don't know exactly how far that has gone, and it's possible that they're only getting started right now, which is kind of late. Iran has kind of a history of actually dithering on these things and, having, engaging in internal debates. And there's always that faction within Iran that just wants to rely entirely on their own indigenous technology. So it may be that the decision was made only recently, and therefore it will take some time, and who knows how much time. A lot of these things like the, advanced fighters and air defense, like the Su-35 and the S-400, it takes a long time, for to integrate those into a nation's armed forces and to train people for them, and it could be many months and months before they really are, really have, let's say, plugged the holes that Israel punched in the past, and have substantially strengthen their defenses and their offensive capabilities.
Right. Well, if you're even saying this right now, then I'm sure the Israeli intelligence is going to be saying the same thing, saying this is our window of opportunity. If we wait too long, they'll have all these defenses set up and we won't be able to carry out any strikes on Iran. Right. So I think that also just makes me feel like they have to go quicker. And okay, there's the military component that we've been discussing, but just what about all the things that I was saying earlier? Just the public opinion turning on Netanyahu in a huge way. He's losing the Christian Zionist even. They're no longer, he's losing, Zionism is dying in this country, and then we have the people questioning 9/11, people questioning October 7th, people questioning the Epstein stuff, all of this sort of pointing at Israel, people questioning the Charlie Kirk assassination, the Samud aid flotilla. This is, I think, a dam is breaking, and I think he has to realize it. And it's like, what do we do now? We push the big red button. And then you have Zelensky that's in a similar position. That's like, we've been watching forced conscription videos for over a year. We know they're running out of men. It's been devastating. We've been talking about Pokrovska's falling. It seems like the last line of defenses. It's going to be a big And then you have just Trump's rhetoric just changing constantly. Him saying, maybe Russia's a paper tiger. Probably Ukraine can maybe take back all of this territory. I understand Trump flip-flops on everything, but I don't think we should be banking on just Trump's flip-flopping to avoid us from World War III. Mm-hmm. And one thing he doesn't flip-flop on is Israel. He does what Netanyahu tells him to do. And then you have Mr. Al-Qaeda himself Al Jelani in New York, shaking hands with Zelensky. Now you got these three guys, like if you need it, you got your false flag expert right there. You got Mr. Al Qaeda right there, Mr. Al Qaeda and ISIS. They're shaking hands with Zelensky and hanging out with General Petraeus, and you got Netanyahu, that's a madman. And then you got Pete Hegseth calls 800 admirals and generals, says, come on over to Virginia. Everybody come over for a secret meeting. Obviously not very secret because we're all talking about it and it's broadcast. And I know a lot of people be like, well, they wouldn't just do something so public, like call 800 admirals and generals, which first of all, that's way too many cooks in the kitchen, right? Can a system even operate if you have 800 admirals and generals? Okay, but besides that, you're not going to, you would say you wouldn't bring all these people over and then declare World War III. It's too obvious. I agree. That's stupid. But look at our track record. I was watching on Fox News diagrams of planes flying over and saying, we'll hit Natanz and Isfahans and all these nuclear bases. And you're like, okay, this is kind of weird that we're just publicly announcing exactly our attack plans. For the Ukraine summer offensive of 2023, we made a freaking trailer like it's a Hollywood movie and announced everybody, this is our plan. We're going to do this. So
the Ukrainians did, right?
The Ukrainians did, yeah.
Right.
This is our plan. But I'm sure at the behest of the United States, because the U.S., what we become is just, we're a Hollywood government. It's all narrative. It's all PR. And that's what it is. And you see Pete Hegseth as well, like, the videos of the Department of War. It's all this sort of like, fifth grade action movie style thrillers is what it is. And so like, that's just par for the course, like you think like, no, there's no way we'd be so stupid as to just bring everybody in openly, tell everybody that we're starting World War III. But it's like, that's kind of how we've been operating, right?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot there that I'll just start.
Yeah,
with,
sorry, I dumped.
with Israel. Okay, yeah. The Israelis, in general, the Zionists are aware of these disturbing trends, and they've been taking measures to counter them, but I think those measures are not going to be successful. I'm sure there is there is alarm within the Zionist elite about this, and that extends to Netanyahu. He's aware of it. At the same time, like I said, I think Netanyahu is just, he is so used to controlling these things and suppressing, dissent, that he probably believes that he can, that he's confident that he will be able to, at least in the short and medium, terms, that he can do it. Now, I think, but maybe even he understands that there is, at some point they will no longer be able to count on the U.S. Of course, there was that Super Sparta speech that he gave, on the need for Israel to become autarkic, to actually cease relying on any other power. Later he had to walk that back because that rang a lot of alarm bells, saying, what are you talking about? Everybody understood it was not really possible. So yeah, there is an awareness, but I think in the short run and the medium run, he understands that he believes anyway that he can control the situation. I think if you want to look for some kind of deadline in the not so distant future, I would look at the congressional midterms, because there is a chance that the Republicans will lose control, and the Democrats, if they're still, largely Zionist, but they have become anti-Netanyahu. And that's a difference. Our political class in this country is Zionist through and through. But there is a division. On the Democratic side, we do see a lot of people that are anti-Netanyahu and really want to get him out of there. Again, just to remember that speech that Chuck Schumer gave, probably 2 years ago now. And that's something that Netanyahu himself has to be aware of. So if I would look for some kind of deadline that's very much on Netanyahu's mind, it would be the congressional midterms. So anyway, rather than the end of this year, by the end of next year, he would feel like a need to act. If he's going to strike Iran, well, he can depend on support from the Trump administration and from the Congress at this point, but it may be more difficult, again, after 2 years from now. So,
but
Yeah,
But
go ahead.
there's all this other pressure building up, like all this pressure from, like to remove Israel from all these sporting events, FIFA and all this stuff. I think eventually that stuff is going to fall through. That's going to be huge political pressure. And then, just like all these countries now at least recognizing Palestine as a state, this has to be bad, right? It can't go. I feel like it's reaching a tipping point. And also just like the flotilla. Like, don't you think that's a huge thing if the flotilla makes it to Gaza and is able to bring baby formula to these poor, starving children and babies and food and life-saving medicine? And they have cameras, and if the people start to see it and document it, and if Israel tries to kill these people, that's a huge problem. I think they're in a pickle here. What can they do? They can't sink these ships. It's too big. They have navies of European governments now protecting them. And it just, the optics of it looks so bad. I mean, just, they're saying, oh, it's a Hamas hospital. It's like, we're carrying baby formula and medicine and food for people that you're starving to death. And they're throwing a fit like, oh, why won't you let us commit this genocide? Oh, it's just such a bad look, right? So it's like, I just feel like everybody is starting to realize and question. I know it's breaking through because like my wife, she is not into geopolitics. She doesn't follow it, but even her feed now, this stuff is trickling in, into her. So it's just permeating the consciousness of everybody, even people that aren't, care about foreign policy or have been, like we've been just obsessed with this topic. It's mainstream now. And I just feel like you have to do something.
Right. There's no question that the pressure is growing, and you can see it reflected in the flotilla itself. Why didn't we see a flotilla earlier? A major one. This is roughly 50 boats, is my understanding. And yeah, there's also a naval escort, supplied by Spain and Italy. I'm not sure about Greece. But that's
I just heard that morning, but I don't know if it's true. And I think it's more than that. I think it's like, was it 55 countries, people on the boat? I don't know how.
I think it's maybe just upwards of 50 boats.
Yeah.
And so it's a major flotilla. Now I don't think those. We'll see how far the naval vessels go. They're in international waters, and that's important because the Israel has attacked previous flotillas in international waters. When they approach the combat zone, they may stop. We'll see. I think probably they will.
But isn't the coast off of Gaza? I mean, that's not Israel's coast. Don't they have?
It shouldn't be, but it just de facto is and has been for a long time. You're right. It should be, Palestinian waters. But now, of course, there is a war. It's declared a combat zone, and that's something that those naval vessels are going to have to respect. But anyway, it is a major challenge because no matter what, if these boarding 50 boats is a lot more challenging than just boarding one, which is what they had to do earlier. And what I wanted to point out was that, we didn't have these large flotillas, like a year ago. Why not? And that is because the Europeans in general were cooperating with the Israelis and preventing these flotillas from forming. But this time it shows there's been a shift. It's just like the governments in these countries are feeling the pressure from their own people. And so this time the flotilla was able to form and even got a naval escort. That shows, that is a signal to the Israeli government that, hey, the tide is turning against you. The anger against you and what you're doing in Gaza is growing and growing. And, of course, is the recent spate of recognitions of the Palestinian state. It's something I don't think it amounts to much, because, again, it's about 30 years too late, basically. That should have been done a long, long time ago when there was really a chance for a Palestinian state. There just isn't now. So it's symbolic. It's much too late, but it also reflects the growing pressure. I think it's just that these governments, in France and England, and they are not really particularly, especially like the British government, we know is really very tight with the Zionists and very supportive of Netanyahu's government, but they feel the pressure from below. The labor government, a lot of their base is very, very angry about this. So this is something that they're, that a sop that they're throwing to them. I think most of the base sees through it and sees that it's meaningless and nothing really has changed. But it shows again that there is this pressure, and the Israeli government certainly is aware of it. But at the same time, within Israel, you have a very different kind of dynamic. You don't have, the pressure is pushing them in the other direction. It is it is in favor of these, expansion of the greater Israel project, of strikes on their neighbors. All those things are very, very popular in Israel. So that's the thing, that's what Netanyahu's dealing with. In the end, yeah, he does need to take into account, international pressures. But the main thing, but I think every politician is more focused on domestic politics, and of course, in his case, it's just the U.S. Like he figures, like we could lose the whole world, but if we still have the U.S. backing us, we're okay. Now, again, there's reasons to be worried there, but I think not in the near future anyway. I think he knows that he's safe for at least until even after the midterms, even if there is a real shift, like the Democrats take control, and they do want to put the screws on Netanyahu. Still, he has the administration, and he may just feel like it's whoever's the next president, whether a Democrat or Republican, he'll be able to maintain that control. Now, he may be wrong, but I wouldn't be surprised if that he has this confidence, that's born of decades of experience.
Something that I heard on the Duran, I'm sure you did as well, is that the Alexes were saying that the reason that countries like France and the UK are recognizing a Palestinian state is, one, to appease the public, to show that, hey, we're humanitarian and we care about the people of Gaza, but it's also to give cover to start the war with Iran, try to separate those things. It's like, look, no, we support Palestine here, the Palestinian state, but these evil Iranians, they are now in violation of the non-proliferation treaty, and they won't allow the IAEA back in, which of course we know is just ridiculous because the United States pulled out of the original agreement, and we did the bombings with them, and now they have these snapback sanctions. We don't have to get all into it, but do you think there's something there like that? That's
I think
they're pretty good. The shout out to the Duran.
Right. No. It's that they are a wonderful source of information and analysis. I just have to disagree with that particular analysis. I think that there's no need to tie like the Palestinian state recognition with, or tie it to Iran or a potential war with Iran. I think you can explain it just on the basis of the pressure. I don't think there's any need. Like, these governments aren't thinking, well, there's going to be a war in 3 months and I need to, to show that I'm concerned about the Muslim world in some way. I just don't see that. It's possible that it's among the factors that some of these governments were considering. But I think this sudden spate of recognitions is just a direct response to the growing pressure that is growing out of, that is a result of the war in Gaza. I think that's more than sufficient to explain why they chose to recognize a Palestinian state.
Okay, well, I still think that war is coming. Well, how do you explain the 800 admirals and generals? What do you think that's all about?
Yeah. We didn't even get to that, and we didn't even get to the Zelensky part of your question.
Yeah, there's so many. See, I don't know. Maybe
right. I know there's so much going on.
I'm drawing all these threads together, and maybe they're not connected, but I just feel like something's happening.
Yeah, well, there is an awful lot going on, and that's, it's like we become used to it, but it's not normal. It wasn't too long ago that, there might be a war in some distant country like Angola, or, but but
Right,
it
you
just
started off with Venezuela. I'm like, oh,
yeah, I know. Yeah, no, no. I'm just talking about. I'm not saying there will be one in, but it's just,
I'm
I'm just
just
thinking
saying,
like
yeah.
during my youth, that's how it was. It's just, but here are these very major conflicts are just breaking out all around the world, and that is worrying, and we just sort of begin to take it as for granted. And we really shouldn't. This is not a normal state, or not. This is not the way things have been for more than half a century. But that's the way they are now. Now let's see. In the case of the 800 generals and admirals, I I don't think that has anything to do with some sort of planned operation. It's not, that would be quite unusual. That's just generally not the practice, that you bring them all together and tell them, well, we're going to launch this war. They get their orders. You talk with a few of the top generals and then you work it out. And then,
Yeah, but we got Trump and Pete Hegseth in charge.
Okay. Well,
it's
well, that's
beast.
the thing. That's exactly, that's a problem when you're dealing with Trump and his administration. It's like the usual, assumptions are, become shaky, right? You just never know for sure. But I just looking at like what Hegseth has been doing, he has been firing a lot of generals, and putting in Trump loyalists, getting rid of people that he describes as woke, and so on and so forth. And maybe these are sensible firings. I haven't really looked into them. I don't know, but there's a fear among the generals and the admirals that this is actually part of an an expansion of that purge. That he's going to just clean the stables here and get rid of a lot of them. Yeah, actually, another thing they're doing is that they're not just firing and replacing; they're also simply firing. There is, as you pointed out, kind of an excess number of these top military leaders, and we have a very top-heavy kind of army, and probably it makes sense to reduce the number of admirals and generals, and maybe that's what we're going to see there. That would be my guess. It really is. I don't, but you're right. It could be connected to some kind of planned operation somewhere. I would be surprised if that turns out to be true, but we'll see.
I think your problem, Dad, is that you're too rational and logical, and it's hard to apply. And there's some big curveballs that are in the current system, and I mean, one of them that. I know we don't have any evidence, and I know we don't talk about it too much, but it's just the Epstein stuff is just like, I just feel like if Trump is in there and he's on video doing some horrific stuff, and he can't bury this, people won't let it go, and if he doesn't release it, people like me are just going to assume it's true. That's a horrible thing to have around your name. Like, why can't you clear it? Just clear it, release the files. Why aren't you releasing it? And so if that's true and he is being blackmailed by Israel because he's doing some horrific stuff with kids or whatever it is, then and then you realize that people these are just people. We sometimes think about like the government, the state, that there's somehow these holy people that are above everybody else and understand and see further. It's like, that's not true. These are just normal people that have lots of flaws, and Trump is definitely one of those. And he might do whatever he can to save his skin and his legacy. And he's around other people that are in the same situation. So you have this horrible, evil cabal of people that have, engaged in horrific behaviors or are all in on something, and they're being exposed. So what do? Well, we still hold the levers of power. Okay, we were polling all of them, trying to suppress free speech, trying to control the narrative. It's not working. Eventually, you push the big button and start World War III. That's just kind of what I feel like is happening.
Yeah.
And then maybe I'm insane.
No, you're not insane. You're just living in an insane world, And I don't know that's true. You don't know that it's true either. But there is a lot of reason to be suspicious. I have to admit there's a possibility of it. I was saying that Netanyahu has his hands on different levers of power, and a lot of them we can see. So we can explain Trump's behavior by without going to Epstein. We can just see again, the mega donors and the control of Congress and so on and so forth. And, the control of so much of the media, all of that is very, very important. And then Trump's, his history of being a a Zionist advocate. If we saw that in the past, well, he was actually very sympathetic to the Palestinians, and then something, all of a sudden he did this, made the sharp turn to Zionism. I think we have reason to be suspicious, but I think, I haven't heard anything to contradict this, that he's always been a Zionist. And we've seen that in his statements and in his actions, including very much in his first term. But I don't deny the possibility that one of those levers of power could extend to some sort of blackmail. That's certainly possible. It certainly is. And, we know that he was very close to Epstein. Now, maybe there's, I'm sure that there's some, what you could call at least unsavory behavior on his part. It may not be actually criminal or whatever, but he's still enough that he wants to cover it up. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe there is criminal. I just don't know. But anyway, that, this just gives, one more way for Netanyahu to control the administration, if indeed that's true. He already has quite a few, means of control, and this would just be yet another one. And it may also explain his confidence, like the reason that he's just not worried. He sees these trends, and his allies are out there fighting. Larry Ellison has gained control of major media in this country, and he'll crazy. Right. So that's, I think in the end that's not going to be successful. People see it happening, and it's actually could backfire on them. But that's what they're doing. They're doing what they've always done, but actually to just take it to a whole other level right now. But if he does have some, some, what do you call it, compromise on
compromising material, some blackmail,
right. That just may, again, explain why he may not be so sensitive to these growing pressures, because he thinks, no matter what, it's just like, I know that he's mine. He's going to do what I ask him to do. That could be true. That could be true. I don't, discount that possibility.
We need this release. I mean, there's all these questions, and I'm glad that so many people are asking him. Like, people don't stop putting the pressure on the Epstein stuff. Like, Thomas Massey's doing great work out there. Let's see what they can do to get them out. But if they don't release it, then I just feel like we know. It's like, why? Because there's when they raided Epstein's penthouse in New York, they unlocked a whole treasure trove of thousands of hours of footage that they have. It's like clear, and nobody gets arrested except Ghislaine Maxwell. We have all these testimonies from all these victims. It's just so sick, and it's just like, we can't survive as a country if we don't come clean with this. And then also like the 9/11 stuff coming up again. Tucker Carlson bringing it front and center, asking big questions like, why can't we see all the people that shorted this disaster? That people clearly knew that there was clearly foreknowledge of this. The CIA, Mossad had foreknowledge of this event. It's just there's no trust left. No. So I just feel like we have to come clean, and if we don't, the pressure is just going to keep on building and building. And then if they can't come clean, they just start a war. That's the way they get out of these things, and then they can enact wartime powers, and that's where I'm afraid we're going. And I don't know. I was hoping you could convince me otherwise, Dad. I don't think you did. Did I convince you? Make you think that war is coming? Do you have where are you standing?
Well, no. I think again, there's, like I was saying, there's so much really chaos and conflict in the world, and we're talking about high level conflict, that involving the major powers. That there is a real danger of a wider war, a world war. It's there. It doesn't mean that it's going to happen. We may avoid it for various reasons, but there's reason to be concerned. I guess I'm just going back to that long question. I was remembering another part of it that maybe I should address right now. It's just, going to Zelensky and the Ukrainians. These recent efforts, and I think they clearly are deliberate efforts on the part of the Europeans to escalate, by claiming, airspace violations by the Russians. I think in the case of Poland, it's almost certainly, a false flag. And I think whatever happened in Estonia, it's either greatly exaggerated or just completely fabricated. In any case, there's just no reason to invoke Article 4. There's even a talk of invoking Article 4 over these drone sightings. Absolutely no evidence has been presented that the Russians have had anything to do with it. But even so, I think Denmark was talking about invoking Article 4. I think it's just part of this. So, if you see them resorting to these tactics, essentially false flag, it shows the level of their desperation, of these governments, and it indicates, the lengths to which they might go to draw the U.S. in. Maybe these false flags have failed. I think, again, Trump is just has refused to respond to that. I saw a report. Just a headline this morning that U.S. intelligence had assessed that there wasn't really anything to these so-called, violations. So that's interesting. That's reassuring, but I doubt that the Europeans are going to give up so easily. And it just shows what maybe is lying in store for us, especially if, like I've said, the Russians really break through and start to advance quickly, they cross the Dnieper, et cetera, as we've spoken of many times. So, at that point, they just may throw caution to the winds and, not go for some piddly airspace violation, false flag, but something, on a much larger scale. And it just may, at that point, who knows? The Americans may find it impossible to resist and may be pulled in. There's nothing inevitable about that. I'm not saying that that's going to happen. I'm not saying that. I think it's almost certain that there are going to be more false flags, but that they're going to actually succeed. The Americans may just have enough sanity to just stay out of it. They have enough understanding of what the Europeans are doing just to keep out of it. But again, with Trump at the top, there's just, so far, there's certain things like, again, he doesn't seem to be falling for these escalations. But you just never know. It's hard to maintain confidence in him. Again, it's just that we've seen so many 180s. Who knows? At some point, he may just get really mad at the Russians and decide to just say, to hell with them. Let's shoot down their planes or something. Maybe not, but there's no reason to be confident.
You think that do we have a successful false flag? I just feel like I'm also worried about false flags. I think that we're entering into, peak false flag season now as things get more desperate. But I feel like the problem is that everybody is kind of looking for it now. I just don't know how successful they could be with the false flag because everybody is suspicious of both of these countries. So, I don't know.
Yeah,
and let's say
that's a good point.
Let's say we even do start a major war, whether it's escalate in Ukraine and God forbid all of a sudden NATO's at war with Russia and we're looking at, potentially the end of the world with these nuclear weapons, or if it's a large regional war with Iran. Even if that does happen, like if the U.S. just goes out and starts to try to put boots on the ground in Iran or is doing these extended bombing campaigns, but our bases are now getting hit, Israel's getting pounded. How are the American people going to react? Like, can the war even happen? If everybody's like, what? Nobody wants this. Why are we 10,000 miles away on the other side of the world when everybody here has got problems with, people dying of fentanyl and homeless people here and just can't afford rent and groceries. And it's just like, we got problems here. What are we doing over there? I just don't think, what do you think would happen?
Yeah, well, that's true. And that's in an odd way. It's not really in an odd way. That is a reason to be hopeful, that again, we will avert disaster. It's not just the U.S., but of course it's all the European countries. You just don't find the willingness on the part of the populations, to support war. It's just not there. We have a political class that's all for it, just talks war, all day long. But if they can't put together an army, in the end, it doesn't mean anything. An army that will actually go and fight for them. And it's not clear that they will. It's again, though, false flags have there's a reason that false flags are done, and that is that they often succeed in convincing those reluctant populations to go to war. they really believe, they see the pictures of the dead babies and so on and so forth, and think that we just can't, this has to end. We have to stop the evil Russians, even though, of course, it was a false flag. But that's discovered years later. Or there's some talk of it at the time, but it's suppressed. And then the emotions rise and people just stop thinking.
Yeah.
But it's going to be tough. It's going to, like you said, you pointed out that there is just a growing skepticism. A generation ago, people in the West really overwhelmingly trusted their institutions, the media and so on, to tell them the truth. Especially about major issues like this and foreign policy issues. There's really very little skepticism, but that skepticism has really grown. So you're right. It just may not succeed.
Right. And also, I mean, just think about, if we go back 30 years ago, it's like, okay, yeah, there's 5 major news networks and they control them all. So they are able to control the narrative, but it's just not that landscape anymore. So I just don't think they don't have that monopoly on information. It just, things have changed so much in the past 10 years, 20 years, that the people that are in charge now, they're living there in the 90s or the 80s or whatever it is. That's where their mind is. They have no idea like how advanced China is. They're oblivious to the power of China now, and Russia as well. They're just completely oblivious to it. And they also believe that they can just create their own reality, right? There was that famous, who said that? Something like, we create our own reality now in the 90s.
Okay, yeah. Karl Rove. I think it was Karl Rove. Yeah.
Right. So that's the mindset that they occupy now, is that we still are able to create our own reality. And it's like, guys, you can't. And when you try to, it's just so obvious now. It's so apparent. Yeah. And we're just bad at it. Maybe it's because we've just had so much success in the past. I mean, when I look at things that they're putting out, like the text chain without any timestamps between Tyler Robinson, I forget his name already, and Lance Twiggs. Like, it was just like, well, come on, guys, you're not even doing a good job of feeding us this slop. It's just. Yeah.
Well, I don't know so much about that, but for example, this so-called incursion of Poland, you look at the pictures and you can see the duct tape, or the plane sitting on top of.
Just landed on a chicken coop. Perfectly.
Yeah, somebody described it as a rabbit hutch. It looks more like a rabbit hutch to me, but who knows? It may be a chicken coop. Whatever. Just sitting there on top of it. And you say, "Come on, you can do better than that." I mean, this is just really silly. You could,
right.
Yeah. So right. It's just. I think it was Alexander Mercouris who very properly pointed out that it's just the abysmal failure of Western media to actually go after these stories and question them, because you can, just the average person looking at these pictures, he immediately has all these questions, and they just don't ask them. It's like that's the most basic. That's their function, is actually to question authority and to test these stories, but they don't. They have ceased to be real journalists, and that's a real It's just true of mainstream media throughout the West, especially when it comes to foreign policy issues. It's just like they know their job, they know who the enemy is, and who the good guys are and the bad guys are, and then everything has to fit into that, and they don't do anything to question that narrative, and that's But the rest of us, because of that habit, have become increasingly skeptical. It's like, why waste my time reading the New York Times, just to know. Mainly, I'll look at those mainstream sources to get a sense of what the establishment is thinking, rather than find out what's really going on.
Right. And, I just think that every day there are thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people that come to this realization, like, I can't trust the mainstream media anymore. I can't. Every day that's happening. But you never have it on the other side, that people that have gone out into the dissident media and then say, you know what? I need to go back to mainstream. And so people aren't going back to mainstream at all. It's everybody is being siphoned off from their narrative control propaganda outlets and moving off. Every day they're losing people and shedding people, which is another reason that, like, if you want to, enact a war or, put out your thing, they're using up all of their trust, the capital that they built up, all the trust capital that they built up all of these decades, just like that. And it's just, it's evaporating so quickly.
Right.
And it's like,
you guys
that's a real problem for them.
Yeah.
Like who, like TikTok, like I can't believe like Larry Ellison now is getting this and what he's buying, like Paramount, CBS, like everything's like, what? Like this, just, I'm done with it, you know? I just,
You know, the guy is, you know, he is a fervent Zionist, very open about it, and he has been for all his life. You know, so
I
we
think
know
he's
what
the largest private donor to the IDF.
That's correct. You're right.
Right. So it just shows you, like, we know where his loyalties are, what his goal is, what he's going to do. You know, it's just, it's crazy. Okay, Dad, let me show you. I want to just ask you one more thing before we end today.
Okay.
So I don't know if you saw in that Yemen flew a drone and hit the Eilat, I believe it's pronounced Eilat in Israel. Did you see that?
Yeah, I think it struck a hotel and injured 22 people. Is that right?
Right. So I'm going to show you the video of it. So what struck, and we'll talk about what's so surprising about it right here.
זה הולך לקניון, חביבי. אשכרה. תוך הקניון. תירגעי, מורן, הוא רץ לאופנוע.
Okay, that's it. So what struck me about that was just how slow moving it was. And where's Israel's air defense? I feel like I could have shot that down with a rifle, you know? It just,
it shows a very serious air defense failure, no question about it.
So how is that possible? I mean, we talk about the Iron Dome. This is a drone. This isn't a hypersonic missile. I mean, if people remember when Iran was striking, just how fast those things were coming down, instant. And here, I was getting bored already in the video. It's like, okay, it's just loitering along. It's like,
right.
Anybody got a slingshot? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, right. Well, you know, that's, again, I think this is an evidence in favor of my argument, you know, that they got to build up their air defenses again. But if their drones can fly in like this, because actually during the 12-day war, that was one thing that the Iranians couldn't do. That the Israeli air defense, was not always up to the task of bringing down the ballistic missiles. That's clear. You know, we saw them penetrate. I don't know what the percentages are. The Israelis pretend that it's very, very high, but I know other people, experts like Ted. Oh gosh, Postal, exactly. I was almost going to say Ted Koppel, you know, it wouldn't be Ted Postal. Yeah, say that it was clear that the great majority of these ballistic missiles were getting through, but they could shoot down the drones, you know, for obvious reasons. They're just so much slower moving, and they did shoot down virtually all of the drones. I think there's really no controversy about that. But you know, you see that.
Hold on. I would say that the U.S. shot down a lot of them. A lot of them were our Sidewinder missiles that we were firing. You know, we got Jordan, Saudi Arabia, the United States. It was half of the Western world that was shooting these down.
That's true. You know, it's not just Israeli air defense. It was Israeli air defense plus, you know, missiles fired by the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Air Force and the Jordanian Air Force. And I think the Brits and the French were also involved. That's very true. But, you know, there's a limit to the number of missiles that they have, like twos. And it's, you know, if those stockpiles are not replenished, you know, both by the Israelis and by their allies in the region, then it will just become, you know, the contest will become entirely lopsided. I mean, that the Iranians will just be able to send in not just their ballistic missiles, but drones, and they can be able to strike, you know, hundreds of targets in a day rather than dozens. And it would be devastating for Israel. So they do have to replenish those stockpiles.
Right, but the problem is they can't. We know that there's only 550 Patriot interceptors that we produce annually, and we're trying to supply them.
Well, they're claiming they're up to 600 now.
Okay, all right, 600. Whoa,
but that's not even enough for Ukraine. It's like not even enough for a month in Ukraine.
Not even a week, right? You have to fire like 2 interceptors at each target to have a decent chance of shooting it down, and they'll send a drone swarm or a missile swarm that consists of hundreds. So like,
Yeah.
You can't. It's just ridiculous. So I mean, like, you're acting like they need to build up their air defense. I'm just saying that I think they can't. Right? I mean, it's not like there's going to just be a one moment where it's like, oh, we got 10,000, now we can start the war. It's like, no, they don't have them now, and they're not going to have them in the future, because if Yemen just fires 1 or 2 drones a day, that completely uses up all of our production capacity. I think our THAAD interceptors are way lower. I think we make like 50 a year or something like this, and they cost like 12 million each. It's like, it's absurd. So it's like it's just so stupid where we're going in this. I don't think people realize how third world and weak the U.S. military is. It was so impressive 20, 30 years ago, but right now it isn't. Our ships are, they, in a modern war, it's about drones and hypersonic missiles and air defense. And we don't have the ability to, first of all, we don't produce good ones. And then more importantly, we don't have the ability to produce at scale. I mean, we don't even have operational hypersonic missiles. And the Patriot system is it just doesn't work very well. It's just, I just don't. Trump's like, oh, it's fantastic, it's great. It's like, yeah, shooting slow $5,000 drones can't shoot down anything hypersonic.
Well, not even necessarily drones. I mean, that was a complaint by the Saudi Arabians, because they invested heavily in the Patriot systems, and the Yemeni drones were getting through and did a lot of damage to their oil extraction and refining facilities. So
just with drones.
Yeah. I think, they're actually better. Ballistic missiles are just harder to shoot down. That's really what they're designed for. And aircraft, I think they're pretty good at shooting down aircraft too. They're just more vulnerable. But some drones, actually that fly very at low altitudes are hard, are actually make difficult targets for the Patriot system.
So, yeah, we don't even have it. It's like we don't even have the air defense. Is that fair to say, that we don't have adequate, I would say?
Yeah, no, it's a serious problem. It's a serious problem. Even prior to the outbreak of war in Ukraine, there was talk about, the deficiencies, in with respect to air defense interceptors. It was a problem back then. We were already having to, shuffle these systems around. The Saudi Arabians, had their war against Yemen. They were complaining about it back then. And then the problem's only gotten worse. There's been an effort to increase production, but from what I hear, the success has been minimal, like from 550 to 600, which is just ridiculous. Again, it's just completely, I don't know why anybody would want to buy one of these systems. Even if you thought they were pretty good, then, if you don't have the interceptors, they're meaningless. So, why? You just say, well, okay, I'll buy the system and I'll have to wait for 10 years for the interceptors to show up. I mean, that's what's happening in places like Europe. It's just these countries have to, after they gave all their interceptors to Ukraine or their launchers, now they have to get in line and wait years, to actually get a replacement. So it's absurd. It's a real problem. It's a problem obviously for Israel too.
Right. I feel like the MIC is just one big money laundering scheme. That's why people buy them, because people are just lining their pockets with it, because they know that it's just, just print that money, give some to me. Yeah, they don't care if it works. Right.
Well, clearly these American systems, they may actually be pretty good. Some of them may, actually be excellent. But the thing is, they don't have that production capacity behind them. So even they might be good for a short, 1 week war. In some cases, maybe in some cases they're not even good for that. But let's just grant that. But we've found that, that 21st century warfare, between near peer adversaries is a war of attrition. We saw that actually, we see that most definitely in Ukraine, that's now at 3.5 years. But I think we saw that actually starting to play out in the 12-day war too. It was just a back and forth. And it was the awareness that, wait a second, okay, we got our licks in, especially that first day, but this is turning into a war of attrition and we're not set up to fight this war. Let's call it off. And
Right.
that I think that basic fact hasn't changed. We're just not prepared for a war of attrition.
We're
Whether
not
it's in
prepared
Ukraine
for
or
a
the Middle
21st
East.
century war. That's what it is. That's really what it is. I mean,
maybe a 21st century war against a third world country. We'll see what happens
well,
in
we
Venezuela.
lost to Yemen, so I
Okay,
say no.
yeah, good point.
I think like if you see just what happened that 12-day war, the exchange, it's like there were impressive missiles coming down fast, fire raining from the skies that hitting Israel. And what do we see Israel do? They got to get back, do some maintenance on their jets, refuel, fly off, tell the America to come and give them some refuel them halfway through the air, and then they fire a much smaller payload because they're in a plane, they can't carry that much, and then they can't get deep into Iranian airspace, so they get shot down. And then, if Iran's getting the S-400 and the Hongqi, the Chinese air defense systems, then like you're in trouble. You don't have missiles. You don't have the technology. I think that's one of the things that's blew my mind. And I think most people haven't come to that realization as well. It's like, wait a second, because we've just been indoctrinated our whole life. America number one by miles. By miles. It's like, wait a second. We don't even have missiles that really work well. You mean the people, the poorest country in the Arab world, the Yemenis, the Houthis, they have perhaps more advanced missiles than America. It's insane, and people will get mad at that and be like, "There's no way." It's just like, well, just show me. Where is our missiles, our missile technology? We supplied the ATACMS to Ukraine. Those things did nothing. They're worthless. The only thing that Ukraine actually seems to have that is doing decently are their drones that they developed internally within Ukraine, because the US drones are garbage. And of course, all those parts come from China. So, I mean, if you want to go over to China will build 100 million drones to America's one and just flood you. It's just insane. This posturing, this idea that we are this military superpower. It's like, yeah, we were before there were hypersonic missiles and proper air defense, when you could just bring your aircraft carrier to a coast and just bomb a country forever. That's not the world we live in. We saw what happened when we sent our Navy into the Red Sea to try to stop the Houthis. We had to turn tail and run. We lost 3 F-18s in that campaign and something like 20 Reaper drones. It's like, and that's against the poorest country in the Middle East. There's a country that's been bombed by us via Saudi Arabia for a decade. It's just a joke. And I just hate this chest thumping with nothing to back it up. I just wish America had some humility and just recognize that, yeah, we're not as great as we say we are. And thank God we aren't, because I'm afraid what would happen. But we need some humility, self-reflection, and work with these other countries. Be nice to people. Don't just, it's so obvious. It's so clear, but we can't get anybody in power to do that, because there's all these lobbyists, the military industrial complex, the Zionists, whatever it is, they're all in control, and all they care about is themselves and their own, ideologues that they have, their own ideas of what the world should be in U.S. global hegemony. And it's just so frustrating. It's just, nobody wants this except these evil people that are just siphoning and sucking the life out of all of us, taking all of our money, go die for this cause or that cause. It's just makes me sick.
Yeah, well, I think it does actually extend beyond. I think what you say is largely true, but it does extend beyond the ruling class, we'll say, in this country. The average American is still stuck, in that, still has that mindset that, again, America is number one, and they like to hear it. They like to hear it from their politicians. They may not actually want a war. I think they don't. But they like to hear that we're number one, and they don't, they don't want to hear this negative talk about, hey, wait a second, we're falling behind. We're going to have to completely, rethink and probably, reform our procurement system and so on and so forth. There doesn't seem to be, unfortunately, the necessary awareness, for that to happen at this point. So the problem does extend beyond the ruling class, I would say.
Yeah.
But it can be overcome,
Everybody likes to say, FAFO, right? Well, America's about to find out. We keep on effing around like this. We're going to find out. And then it'll break through the consciousness of mainstream people, I think, of the average American. I hope so. Because just what we're doing is just so obnoxious, so unnecessary, so dangerous. And we act like we have with the complete impunity. We don't have anything to back it up. So, and that's what I'm worried about. We're going to find out. But also that's one of the things that perhaps will take us away from, complete total destruction, is that just our military weakness. It's the rot in here. When we try to start this military engine, it's going to sputter and die in a couple of days, and then we're just going to be so humiliated and embarrassed. Let's just hope that we will learn our lesson at that point and not try to launch nukes, because that's the only thing that we might have left in our arsenal after 2 weeks of war with Iran, Okay, Dad. Well, I think we can end it there unless there's anything else you'd like to chip in.
Oh, I think this is a good ending point.
Okay. All right. Have a good rest of your day and a great weekend.
You too.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.